While we're on this subject, I want to ask you about a player that you haven't coached, and that's Dwight Howard. On the one hand, by any definition, he's one of the top centers in the NBA. Even with all the difficulties last year, all the injuries that he had, he led the league in rebounding. He was second in field goal percentage. However, all these years in the NBA, he still does not have a go-to offensive move. Last 2 seasons, he was a 49% free throw shooter. So someone like myself, an amateur basketball fella, looks at Dwight Howard and says, as good as he is and as talented as he is, and also look at some of the decisions that he's made in his business situation, he seems kind of flaky. I don't think you can win an NBA championship with Dwight Howard as your center. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think you're wrong. And I've had, those type of feelings that you've had for years. I mean,
about him?
About various players in the league. The things I feel about Dwight that are championship quality is the fact you didn't mention, I think, that he's a block shot leader last year too.
Right.
So his rebounding.
Well, defensively, he's as
good
as it
he's
gets.
Defensive player of the year. And that's basically what I've always felt. A player has to be is a championship quality. You need to have a defensive stopper for a center. But what we forget is the fact that Dwight was coming back off a back operation. I had a spinal fusion. I went through it. I sat out a whole year between the operation and resuming to play again as a player. And it took me a half a year even then to get back to where I felt I was a consistent player. So it took me about a year and a half to come back from back surgery. Now, back surgery has changed since the time I had it. But Dwight had gone through back surgery, I think in June or late May in the year he sat out, and he was playing right away. He came right back, didn't miss a game, and really didn't look like he was moving well until January or February. So we didn't see the best part of Dwight Howard when he was here.
I'm not sure a lot of people understand. I didn't quite understand, Phil, how close you came to becoming a minister. You tell the story, your parents were both Pentecostal ministers, your mother and your father,
right,
growing up in that type of household. And that when Red Holzman, the coach of the Knicks, came to the University of North Dakota to talk to you about maybe playing for the Knicks, the first thing you said to him is, well, I'm not going to play basketball, I'm going to go to graduate school and I'm going into the ministry. So we know what it was about basketball that drew you to that way of life, but what was it about the ministry that maybe you decided, because we could picture you as being very good at it if you dedicated your life to it, but what was it about the ministry that you said, you know what, not for me?
Well, the focus of a child, and I think this goes through everybody who's connected, deeply connected to a religious upbringing, is that the focus is all about, the end game. It's not about money, it's not about career, it's not about personal glory, it's about the end game of where you put your money, the common verse is you'll build up your treasure in heaven where moth and rust do not corrupt. Our earthly treasures are pretty ephemeral when you get down to it. They all kind of break down and our new cars get old and whatnot. But when we do these searches, soul searches to do for better life, we're trying to lay up our treasures in quote unquote heaven. So when I was a kid, this was kind of drilled into me as, this is really the goal. My parents, basically lived a very Spartan life and a very limited amount of, pension. And they actually had a parsonage, and we lived in it. And people brought food and groceries and things to the church to try to help a minister and his family out. But the pay was really limited. But that wasn't the end game. There was certainly the end game was looking forward to your glory in the days that you were going to die and go to heaven and be part of this. But the real thing about it is this community that was built up. And the community is really something that's special in that sense. People that tremendously care for each other and they're willing to sacrifice for each other. And I was dedicated in front of that community to be a minister. And that dedication picture's in that book. It's kind of a funny little picture, but that was a very big commitment, and my parents had that strong desire to have us do that. All of us failed. I had a sister who became a nurse, that was going to be a missionary nurse and go to the cause, who never went, and my brothers never fulfilled their promise of being ministers. And I certainly didn't either. But I was the one that took religion and philosophy and psychology combination course in college to kind of stay maybe on an even keel towards that.
It's interesting that you would sort of move into this Zen study because it's very different from what you're describing, which is focusing on being as present as you can in the current moment as opposed to planning for the afterlife. Is that the sort of divergence that you eventually took?
I think that's where I saw where the rubber didn't meet the road, and what I was brought up with is that, you know, you could do the toil and the trial and the persecution and whatever else because you were laying up treasure in heaven, whereas the reality is that it's the moment-to-moment existence that counts.